Hello everyone, this is a comprehensive video showing you how to remove the vacuum pump from a Sprinter van with the engine code OM651. Now this specific van is OM651-955. Specifically it's a 316 CDI 2017, but it should be valid from any engine from 2008 onwards. Now, common failure points to know for this part specifically is either if the brake pedal is absolutely rock solid and barely works, or if it feels like it's in limp mode, where there are certain valves that aren't opening which are vacuum powered. Now then, getting started straight away, we're going to start off with just removing these top parts of the engine. We're going to be working our way from the top downwards. So essentially what we're first of all going to want to do is remove this airbox. Hopefully this is quite an easy step for you guys to follow along with. All you're going to have to do is remove all of these fiddly little connectors and other parts. Stuff like the jump connector that I just removed, the clip is on the bottom for that one. And as well on the other side, you can't quite see, but that is the oil fill. And what you just want to do is fold that one out of the way. Now, when it comes to this part, all I'm going to do is find a flathead screwdriver to, of course, just unscrew that one hose pipe clamp. And once that's off, of course, that just pulls straight off. Now, of course, once that's all pulled out of the way, we've got plenty more space to work with. Now, for this next part, what we're going to need is a 10mm socket on a long extension. Essentially, this is just to unbolt the cabin air filter housing. So as you're going to see here, we've got 2 bolts on the left and 2 bolts on the right, and of course once they're free they just come loose by hand. Now getting this part out can be quite tricky. As you can see, there's the washer fluid top up nozzle that's sort of in the way, so what you want to do is just rotate it out to the right, and then eventually with a bit of bending and a bit of persuading it will come straight out. Now we've got plenty more space to be working on the engine here now that it's exposed. So what we're going to be looking at here is just here on the right, on the very top in the middle of the screen, you've got the vacuum distributor box. So what we're just going to do here is unscrew that. Now these are the start of the specific Sprinter Mercedes bolts. I believe they're E10. What I'd recommend you do is just get a full socket set of E ranging from say E5 to E20. As apparently these do tend to vary. However, for this job it's just the one socket that we need. So unscrewing 3 quite long bolts on that part, then the whole thing should just pop straight off. One thing you are going to have to do is just bear in mind you've got, of course, vacuum lines coming 1 from the top and 3 from the bottom. So following on, of course, with what I'm doing here in the video, you're just going to want to pull those off. They pop straight off. And also to mention, this is quite a good way of testing individual lines. Of course, it's quite easy just to pop these off and then test from there. Now comes the removal of quite an annoying little bracket at the back of the engine here. So what you're going to see is this white pipe clip. Now what you want to do is remove the clip itself from the bracket, not from the pipe. So you can see what I've done there. And here is a more up close shot. So what we're just going to do is get that E10 socket in there, remove that, and then as simple as that, we can pull out 1 bolt and 1 L-shaped bracket, which I show you just here. It's easy as that. Now with that bracket out of the way, we can get a look at this silver pipe. Now what we're going to need is the same E10 socket but on a flexible joint. Because of that, is just for getting to this 1 bolt up here. Now, as you're going to see, I'm going to struggle quite a bit with getting to this. As it turns out, what you can do is stick it through that bracket just there, as I'm doing, and then it comes straight out. Now, of course, you can't get straight onto the bolt, so you definitely need that flexible little adapter piece. But once that's off, you can get 2 bolts there, and 2 bolts at the other end of the pipe, and then the whole thing pops out. Now you're going to see when I pop it out there's a bit that sticks into the engine, and when I first pulled that out it was absolutely disgusting. So what you're going to want to have ready is just a few bits of shop towel, just to essentially clean it up, get rid of any sort of grease and oil that comes off with it. And that will also prepare you for a few steps shortly in the future where we're going to get yet more oil, more grease, and you're going to want to be able to be ready to clean up. And there of course is the part in question. Just make sure you give that a nice good clean so it can come out quite disgusting. Now we're looking at the opening from the pipe that we just removed. So just to the left of it, we've got this little sensor with 2 Torx bolts. Now we're going to want to get rid of that as that gets in the way of the big bolts below that we're going to eventually have to remove. So this is just yet another part that gets in the way. Now the socket that we're going to need, as I've got here, is of course a T20. Again, you're going to want to put this on a flexible joint, and with this one, of course, be very careful as it's a very, very small bolt. They're extremely easy to strip, so make sure, of course, you double check that the bit is all the way inside the bolt. You want to make sure that you don't accidentally put it in skewed, and then you can very easily strip it out. Also, don't do what I'm doing here, using an electric screw gun. You definitely want to make sure you do this by hand, as of course that reduces your chances of breaking these bolts. Now what you're looking at is just a photo, but essentially you can see the 3 holes where the sensor was just up there on the top right side of the image. But what you're looking at just behind there is this one bolt that we're trying to access. Now what this is doing is it's going horizontally to the left into the engine. This is just one of those bolts that gets in the way, so we just want to remove that before we then get to the 4 main bolts holding on this pipe that gets in the way of our actual vacuum pump. Now here we are getting rid of this bolt. So what we've got then is the same E10 socket but on a very long extension, and what we're going to do is reach in there, of course, as I mentioned, horizontally. You can just see that bolt just behind the pipes, so we're going to get rid of that, of course, finally using a proper ratchet. Getting rid of that, it comes out very easily. So now then, all we're just going to do is, right in the middle of the screen, you've got this clip holding a few wires on. So now what I'm just doing is pulling that one off. So with that one off and a bit more out of the way, what we also want to do is make sure we've got, so I'm pointing there to bolts 1, bolts 2, and down in this area, which are even more difficult to show, but we have bolts 3 and bolts 4 as well. Now this is probably the most fiddly part of the entire job, as what we now have to do is get those 4 bolts out. So as you're going to see here, I'm going to be doing a lot of struggling about. I'm probably going to speed up this bit of the video, as essentially what I'm doing is just getting them out. Easiest one first, but essentially going around, making sure you've got all 4. They're essentially shaped as you would expect, one in each corner. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm just reaching underneath all of these vacuum lines. These get a bit annoying, but they're nice and loose. So the first two you want to remove there with the bracket are of course furthest away from the engine on the right hand side, and then the two closest into the engine are the annoying ones. And with those bolts finally removed, we can get started on the underside of the engine. So what we're looking at here is this black pipe. So we've got this silver part of the pipe, that's where we want to unclip it. And then we've also got this connection right here, as well as this one clip just here on the side of the oil pan. So just as I mentioned, we're just going to pull off that connector, make sure those get out of the way, and then we want to unclip the pipe itself. With a small flathead screwdriver, just put it underneath this metal bit, pop it off and out the way, just that bottom piece, and then as easy as that, the whole pipe just pops straight off. Now, as I mentioned, this is where it also gets a bit oily. You might have some here, so just be prepared for that. Have a bit of towel in the way, make sure it doesn't get in your eyes. And of course, as easy as that, it just pops straight down and out, just getting it untied from that piece of wire. So now we're going to look up inside of the engine, and what we're going to spot in the middle of the screen is our elusive vacuum pump. So I'm just quickly showing you here, we've got one bolt that's very easily accessible right there, and the other bolt is obviously in the opposite corner, top left. Now filming those bolts removed was quite annoying, so I just did it off camera. So now what we're just going to do is remove that one vacuum line, obviously coming off the vacuum pump. So just up there, you want to pinch it, you've got on the front and on the back, you can just push it by hand, no tools needed, and it comes straight off. And of course with that off, it's all nice and loose, so now we can essentially just grab it with one hand and it should pop straight out. Now just be aware of any residual oil that might drip down, that's why we've got that little pot just there at the bottom. First time I did it, it did dribble out some oil, but it really isn't that much, so there's nothing to be too worried about. And with that pulled out of the way, we can finally start to get a look at the vacuum pump itself. So, of course, looking at it from that end, there isn't much to see. However, if we look at it from the other side, we're going to get to where we actually pull it out. So, what we've got in there is the same socket, which I believe I show the camera. Yep, again, T20. So what we've got, of course, there is just 4 bolts ready to remove. Now, again, do not do what I'm doing here. Do not use an impact driver. What you want to be using here is just an Allen key or something similar, something that you do it by hand. So just to make sure you don't accidentally strip out any of these bolts. So with that popped off, the next part you want to be very careful of is when you pry this off. If it doesn't come off very easily, you could just send oil flying everywhere. Don't ask me how I know. So just be careful, and of course have shop towels ready, because yes, it makes a big mess. Now truthfully, there really isn't much to service in here, so I'm sort of cutting out a lot of this bit of the video. But essentially, if you use a sort of square socket there, you can give it a quick test, you can make sure you know it's spinning freely, everything's working properly. Now of course in this instance, as you know, it will be spinning in that direction, essentially counterclockwise, and of course as you can imagine it's sucking all the air away from where that pipe is, and then of course, yeah, exhausting it. Now I've just got it temporarily assembled, and I'm just going to quickly show you. If you can hear that sort of little pop sound, that's exactly what you want from it. You want it to just have a bit of vacuum, and of course that shows that it's working properly. Now, one note for reassembly, definitely make sure that the gasket mating surface is nice and clean. Ideally you will want to replace this, as there are only 2 bolts holding it on, so it's not very reliant. And there you have it, simple as that. You can just now go ahead and reinstall it in your engine. Of course, in this instance, I'm only joking. What you will want to do is just follow this video in reverse. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you understand that it may be quite apparent from this video that I am not a certified mechanic in any sense. Of course, making sure that there is no liability held from this video, but I hope it is helpful, just as it was for me.